I had a lot of fear. So I'm an HR executive at the height of my career, experiencing the most success that I've ever had, making the most money that I've ever made. I felt like I'm putting all of that at risk.
That is a snippet of our podcast today. Hey there, Mary Axelsen here, founder of the Mindsight Academy, neuro coach to executives, leaders, entrepreneurs, and a neuro leadership trainer using insights from neuroscience to help you deliver results by learning to work smarter, be in control of your brain, manage yours and others' emotions, change behaviors, flourish, and exceed expectations. Welcome back to another episode of Lead to Excel podcast. I am so thrilled to be with you today because we have a special guest. But before we get into that, remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it, because it will help other people find it and give them the opportunity to understand how they can rewire their own brain to enable them achieve their goals. So without wasting any more time, grab your cup of coffee or your drink or whatever that might be. Put your feet up and listen in. Excited to be back with another episode. And today I have Mary Axelsen. Mary, have I pronounced that correctly?
You did, Maureen. You did amazing.
Hey, awesome. So no, it's so good to have you on Lead to Excel podcast. Can you tell us a bit about you? Who is Mary?
Yeah, I'd love to. And first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. Just excited just to have a conversation, to chat with you. So I'm a prior HR global executive, and I decided in 2020 to leave corporate America and launch my own consulting practice. I've been fortunate that I have worked around the world and predominantly on large scale transformative change. And so what I decided is to build a consulting practice that focuses on elevating potential and performance by focusing on three core areas. And that is strategy and talent development and deployment, leadership development and coaching, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And underneath all of that, I also focus on disruption management. Some people used to call it change management. I'm calling it disruption management because I think it's more appropriate for our times, where we also see what needs to happen and the design of the organization and the culture so that the benefits of the disruption can be realized.
Hey, awesome. So quite a bit there. So Mary, how did you get into HR in the first place? How did that all start?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and one that often gets asked of a lot of HR practitioners. And so I was one of those people, Maureen, where I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I decided to work for a large financial services organization and do a variety of different jobs to help me figure that out. And in my last job in the business, I used to work with HR leaders. And I thought what they did was super cool. And I'm like, you know what? I want to go into the HR profession and try that out and see if I like it. And so my first HR job was working for LLB. And I focused on employee engagement and partnered with the Gallup organization. And I was just hooked from that moment, realizing how business and human resources really are the core of the organization. And that as an HR practitioner and leader, you have an incredible opportunity to have a meaningful impact in the lives of the people who work there and the organization as a whole.
Wow. So how long were you working in HR before you left in 2020?
I had about 20 years of experience.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Right. Okay. So you worked in HR for a few years and really got into employee engagement. Why did you leave?
That's another great question, Maureen. Why did I leave? Because I've always had this entrepreneur spirit about me, and I love disruption management. Right, I love the fact that you can anticipate disruption if you have that foresight, figure out how to capitalize on it to really make sure that your business is staying relevant and competitive in the marketplace. And so I wanted to leave an organization and to be able to go out and do that work more broadly across industries, across different size of companies in different countries, and bring my entrepreneurial spirit with me and not necessarily be confined within an organization with the work that that organization had available and having to do it a certain way. So as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of freedom and you have flexibility. You get a chance to be creative and design and build, a really strong network as well as relationships, bringing that depth of experience and knowledge that you have. So I absolutely love being an entrepreneur and have an enormous amount of gratitude for the experience that I gained while I was in corporate.
Yeah, I can imagine being an entrepreneur is so much fun, but also quite intense. Right. I'm just curious about how easy or difficult it was for you to make that jump or leaving corporate world, because it's almost like leaving your safety net to go out and do something on your own. How was that for you? How long did it take from making the decision to actually launching? And what was that like?
Yeah, so I think that is it's something that a lot of people ponder and wrestle with before they finally make that decision, or they may not even make that decision because there's a lot of fear that goes along with making that decision to leave corporate and go out and stand on your own. And I started preparing for it almost a year ahead of time. And part of that preparation was helping me to understand what I wanted to focus on. And so I actually hired a coach for myself so that she and I could work together so that I could get clearer about what I wanted my business to be and why I wanted my business to be that. And then I spent time figuring out financially, how much revenue, how much money would I have to make to be able to sustain myself. And then I started to think even more broadly, think from a financial vitality perspective, longer term, what would I want that to be? And then I made the decision to leave during a really scary time in our world as well. The pandemic was going on. And I have this message going on in my head, like, who leaves their corporate job in the middle of a pandemic? And of course, this was before all the research that we know now about how many people left, right? Corporate America. Actually, 49% of all new businesses in 20 and 21 are women entrepreneurs, 49% female entrepreneurs during 2021. So I decided to leave. I got the clarity that I needed as far as my business is concerned. And then I started networking. And within 2 weeks, Maureen, of making that decision to leave, I had my first client engagement where I was coaching almost 20 leaders utilizing my coaching circle framework that I had developed. And it's just really blossomed from there. I feel incredibly grateful that I have such a strong network and brand, which has enabled me to really scale my business in a pretty rapid pace.
Yeah, that was brave. But I like the fact that you touched on a few things that I think were really critical. You mentioned fear. And I think before I go into the questions, were you afraid at all? Was there any fear?
I had a lot of fear. I had a
Mm,
lot of fear. And I think sometimes, so I'm an HR executive at the height of my career, experiencing the most success that I've ever had, making the most money that I've ever made. And I felt like I'm putting all of that at risk. Okay.
yeah.
I'm putting all of that at risk, with part of the motivation being around my joy and my happiness. Because
Mm,
even though I was at the height of my career, I was the most miserable that I had ever been, because I wasn't able to solely focus on the type of work that I wanted to do with the people I wanted to do it with, when I wanted to do it, and being clear about the impact, that we wanted to have. So
yeah.
I had to really work through that, Maureen, that fear, and do some deep work around where was that coming from,
Mhm.
um, and how did I overcome it? To include, saboteurs. Like what were those saboteur thoughts going on in my head that were not based on reality, just based, on my fear. And in
Mm,
hindsight, what I tell people, because I talk to a lot of people who are on the cusp of, launching a new business. And I said, in hindsight, I wish I had focused more on abundance, and thinking about how I would be successful, um, versus giving so much time and energy to fear, which only led to scarcity thinking, where I
mhm.
was focused more on what if I fail,
Yeah.
right? Versus what if I succeed? Imagine that. Right? So it's a really great learning experience for me. And it's one that I share frequently when I'm talking to entrepreneurs.
That's great. That was actually the next question I was going to ask you. So, what did you do? How did you overcome the fear? And you actually gave us, a good tip. It's focus on abundance. And I always say it, focus on what you want, not
Mhm.
what you don't want. Because as we tend to focus on what we don't want, and when we do that, the subconscious brain takes us there consistently. So, focus on what you want and then you go to what you want. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. Now, I want us to come to something else you mentioned was getting a coach. And, this I would say was so wise because a lot of people want to do something big, huge like this and think they can do it on their own. And the fact is that we need help because those saboteurs, that resistance will come and it's just helping, somebody helping you to get the clarity you need. So well done for that. And I want to come now to, you did mention your coaching circle framework. Could you tell us what that is about? What is the framework that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest gaps that organizations, have is preparation for their next generation of leaders. 55% of CEOs actually say it's their biggest concern that they don't have their next gen, leaders. The other thing is one of the top drivers for employee engagement, satisfaction, and retention is development and coaching. And so I thought to myself, Maureen, how do I solve for, the next gen of leaders, provide an accelerated development framework, that includes leaders also learning how to coach and giving each other peer to peer feedback.
Mhm.
And so what I decided was, I'm going to use a lot of the same concepts that you see in one-on-one coaching. So we're going to get clear on what is the development focus, right? Why are you focusing on it? Is it because you want to elevate your performance and your impact in the role that you have? Is it because you want to prepare for your next, position? Is it for both? And then what does success look like for you? Like, how will you know that you've actually achieved your goal? You've achieved that upskilling that you desire. And then the other piece of it is on the job experiences. I believe deeply in applied learning. We can go to a workshop or to a session, we can go to a training, but if we don't then do something with the content, the learning that we received, right, it's just going to evaporate. Right? And so you actually have to put it into action and apply it. So what the group does is they identify what their on the job experiences are going to be, so that they can actually develop the skill. So we meet on a monthly basis, where they talk about what their development focus is, the actions that they took in between the coaching circles, and then I give them a reflection guide that they use, that helps them understand what they did well, where they still need to adjust, what they need to start, and what do they need to stop doing. And then I invite the group, their peers, to give them positive reinforcement and affirmation, because coaching and development has to be in the context of psychological and emotional safety. And so to build that trust within the group, we start with positive reinforcement and affirmation, so that they get more comfortable with each other, more willing to take risks, and also to apply that when they're out, actually doing it on the job in between the coaching circles. So the coaching circles tend to last for 6 to 9 months. And by the end of it, the group is so close and connected, right? They have learned what real coaching and development looks like, right? And they start applying their own experience with their teams, in other settings. And I would say to you that 90% of the coaching circles have continued to meet even after the engagement with me has ended, because they experience so much benefit and value from it.
That's really powerful. And I find that to be really effective, even in my own practice. So no,
Yeah.
that's great. Mary, I want us to talk about something else you do that is quite similar to what I do. And I know hopefully very soon we're going to do quite a bit together on this, which is disruption management. And if you just tell us how you work with organizations to really help them, through this process, or with the training, or how you work with clients, and also tell us who you typically work with.
Sure. Yeah, great. So I think what I'll do is I'll give you a real example, that just happened. So I was working with a benefits, a claims organization. They brought in a new senior leader, and they brought her in to really build out and elevate the claims function and ability. And the leadership team had, I think she was the third leader that they had within 3 years. So there was it was a low trust environment. Of course, everyone is still dealing with the challenges of the pandemic. And prior change initiatives have been put in place that actually had failed. So not only did we have low trust in the context of a pandemic, we also had change. We had change fatigue, right? The group was tired. So we came together for a full day session. And the first thing I do, Maureen, is I focus on having a greater understanding of ourselves, focusing on the individual, and what are our preferences around how we want to lead and experience change. And there's actually a change style assessment that you can take. And we tend to fall into 3 different buckets. And so that starts to elevate self-awareness. Okay, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to behave when disruption is in my environment, when I'm experiencing a change. This is the benefits that I'm going to bring. This is where I might be challenged, and I'm going to have to tap in and rely on others. And then we take that learning and we apply it to the team, right? So as a team, if these are our preferences and how we're going to want to lead through the change, how do we come from a place of appreciation and gratitude as far as those differences are concerned? Because we know we want difference so that we're more creative, we're more innovative, and we do better from a problem solving perspective when we challenge each other as far as the idea and the concept is concerned. And then we went a little bit more like into your space where I really feel like you have incredible expertise, Maureen, around how do you create that emotional and psychologically safe environment. So you're building that trust. How do you go? What are the stages of transition that we go through emotionally? We're experiencing a disruption and a change. And how do they help themselves as well as those that they're leading as you're going through that transition? And then what we do is we actually take the disruption that they're experiencing and we start to create change plans. And we start with creating a compelling business case. Like, if you want me to change, if you want me to embrace this disruption that you're bringing into my environment, I have to understand why. Like, why? What are the benefits associated with it? Again, how will we know if we've been successful? Who do I need on the team, right, to be able to make it happen? And then we assess what the current state looks like so that you have a clear understanding where you're coming from a place of strength and where your gaps are organizationally. Then we build out the roadmap so that you're ready for the change. And then we start executing. So I did a full day session with this organization. I can't even begin to explain to you the enthusiasm and the excitement that was in the room by the end of the day, because people felt empowered. They had the autonomy that they wanted to drive the change. They had clarity of plan. They were collaborating with each other. And then we spent a few months following that with each other as they started to execute, so that I could coach them on their plans and help them to understand where they needed to adjust based upon the learning and understand the risks and how to overcome those, like how to mitigate the risks and to celebrate, right? It's such an important part of when you're driving change, when you're when you're introducing this disruption. You got to know and understand what those small wins are along the way, because that is also what helps with your resilience and your desire to stay with it during the bumpy times, because you know that you're winning along the way.
So typically, because what you've described is you do the training, then you coach them through and work with them. So typically, how long would you be with a team while they're working through this change process?
Yeah, it depends upon how big the disruption, the change is. But I would say, ideally somewhere between 4 to 6 months.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good, because that really helps with that change of behavior that you want in when going through change. I love that.
Yeah, and I give them a very simple execution template to use so that they can capture what they've done in the past 30 days, understand what they're going to do in the next 30 days, what their high level milestones are, and then what are those risks and those barriers, which then is real time teaching and learning around execution and adjustment.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. So in terms of still looking at change and leadership, which organizations or what type of organizations do you work with typically?
Yeah, I work across, industries. Marina, I gave you an example of working with an insurance company. Also worked with large financial institutions. I've worked in retail, nonprofit, for profit, private, family owned, healthcare. And so it really, the size of the type of the organization really does not matter. And I feel really fortunate that I've worked across to so many different industries, so that I can bring that strong business acumen to the conversation. So I would say, it's wide open.
Quite diverse. Yeah, quite
Yes,
diverse.
yes.
Yeah, that's good.
And as you know, I've worked globally as well. So I've worked in North America, Europe, Latin America, China. So I have a pretty diverse experiences from that perspective too.
Yeah, that's really useful. That's really useful. Right. Okay. So we're coming to the end now. And where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks. So the name of my company is WeMaax Consulting. So WEMAAX Consulting. So you can search that on my website, as well as I'm on LinkedIn, Mary Axelsen, and both places have my contact information.
Awesome. I'm going to put all that in the description for anyone that wants to reach out to Mary. So, Mary, final word for people who are listening. One word of wisdom or tip you give someone, and it could be someone who wants to start and go into business or an organization that are going through change. So, anywhere, because you've got quite a lot to offer. So, any last word of advice?
Yeah, and I think, the message that I probably give to people the most is do what you love,
Mm,
right? Play to your strengths, those innate talents, those things that come easy to you. Because when we stay with our strengths and our innate talents, it is what gives us the greatest joy, right? Is where we experience the most happiness. It's also the place where we're going to have the greatest impact, right?
mm,
And when you know who you are, then you can align with your purpose, right? The impact that you want to have in the world. The other thing I tell people is to understand your values, right?
yeah.
Why are they like, what are they? Why are they important to you? And how do you ensure that you're living within your value system on a regular basis? So for me, fairness is one of my core values. And so it's at the heart of why I do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, right? Very much aligned with who I am and what I believe in. And then the last thing I would say to go along with that is knowing and understanding where you're sitting in your belief system. Because what we believe is what we will achieve. And so elevating your understanding of what you're believing about yourself, what you're believing about others, what are you believing about the situation, right? And checking yourself and saying, okay, are those beliefs serving me right now? Are they empowering me or are they limiting me? And if you're saying yes to empowering, high five. All right. But if you're sitting in a self-limiting belief, how do you reframe that and get it to that empowering belief, so that you can break through that barrier, and really truly live your best life.
That's a lot there. Thank you so, so much. And I'm just going to end it with what you said. What you believe is what you will achieve. And that is so true. And that is a good way to end this podcast. Mary, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all this wisdom and your experience. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maureen. I really appreciate you having me.
Okay, 3 things before we finish today. Have you subscribed to this podcast? If you haven't, make sure you click that subscribe button wherever you listen to this podcast, because once you subscribe, you will not miss an episode. Bring a guest on, do let me know by leaving a review. Finally, do have a fantastic week, and remember that you are limitless. So I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Bye for now.